Hey there YouTube lovers, my name is BB8 and today we are going to review The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap. I thought after my Metroid Fusion review, it actually did do better than my Banjo-Kazooie review. So I thought, why not do a trilogy of review videos? We've already had Metroid Fusion. I've just not long ago beat the Minish Cap. And I'm still playing Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. But I will be reviewing that game at a later date. But for now, we are going to be reviewing The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap. So without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? For the gameplay. The gameplay for a Zelda game made by Capcom, I do feel like Capcom have managed to pull off the gameplay quite well. Because I do think the art style, I do prefer the art style a bit better to A Link to the Past. Even though I never got to beat A Link to the Past, the Minish Cap does manage to pull off its graphical style quite well for a Game Boy Advance game. And the new gameplay mechanic, where you can shrink down to the size of the Minish, who are like microscopic people who live within Hyrule, I do think the Minish Cap does have the best world building I've seen in a Zelda game to date. Because I do like how they managed to blend in the Minish with certain areas in the game, like the Minish Woods, Hyrule Town, and I do think they managed to pull off the Minish civilization quite well. And I do think those shrinking capabilities are used quite creatively within the game, being able to like solve puzzles and progress through the game's story by doing so. Because I do think for a game that released on the Game Boy Advance, I do think the whole shrinking and growing mechanic is quite a creative mechanic to get through. For the story, I do feel like the story in the Minish Cap is nothing new that I hadn't seen before. Because yet again, the main villain of the game, Vati, I do feel like is one of my new favorite Zelda villains outside of Ganon. Now that you're coming to think about it, but really, the whole Vati turning everyone into stone or like freezing them is nothing new. Because yet again, I have seen stuff like that in film before. The prime example being Disney's Raya and the Last Dragon, which did come out in around 2021, where the drone turned everybody into stone. So I do feel like the whole turning people into stone thing isn't new to me, but with Raya and the Last Dragon taking that concept, I do think the ending though was just, I feel like the ending was not even original though, because Although I do feel like the bosses in this game were quite good. I feel like the whole final act didn't even feel original, because we've already seen it before. Like, we've already seen the whole concept of the main villain taking over Hyrule Castle, which we've already seen it in Breath of the Wild. Even though the Minish Cap did come out 12 years before, I do think Vati was pulled off as a decent villain. Because, yet again, for villains from, like, Link's Awakening, I feel like the main villain in Link's Awakening wasn't really my cup of tea. Although Link's Awakening was good, the remake was alright, the main villain just wasn't for me. For the summary, the gameplay, I'm going to give an 8 out of 10. The gameplay of the Minish Cap, I do feel like with Capcom making a Zelda game, they did manage to pull it off quite well, being the first game in the Four Swords trilogy. With the rest of the Four Swords trilogy being rough, the Minish Cap pulled it off quite well. The graphics, I'm going to give a 9 out of 10. I can't judge the graphics because this game came out in 2005 on the Game Boy Advance, but for a Game Boy Advance game, the graphics do look pretty good. And I do feel like with the graphics adapting to the whole shrinking and growing mechanic and adapting to the environments quite well, the Game Boy Advance and the Minish Cap pulled it off. The story, I'm going to give a 7 out of 10. Because yet again, I do feel like the story was good. I just feel like the ending, like when we got to like the climax, I just feel like the ending wasn't original, but did manage to provide some creative world building into its story with the Minish people and Ezlo. The characters, I'm going to give an 8.5 out of 10, because yet again, this game does have its show-stealing characters. The show-stealing character for me this time was probably Vati. I do like Ezlo as well, even though Ezlo can get a bit annoying sometimes, but I didn't mind Ezlo as a character. The music, I'm going to give an 8.7 out of 10. The music in the Minish Cap, I'm not gonna lie, although they did replay like the iconic Zelda music in like some of the same areas, like they did change the tone of the theme song in some areas, but I do feel like the music was pulled off quite well. The difficulty was a hard one to decide because, yet again, there were a few bosses I was frustrated with, and I felt like some of the dungeons were hard to navigate, and I do feel like some bosses were pulled off in a really creative way. And one boss in this game does remind me a lot of the hands from Super Mario 64. Even though I do find it quite funny. But unlike A Link's Awakening, the Minish Cap managed to keep its bosses quite original. Apart from that one boss that did remind me of Mario 64, which does have to be my favourite boss within the game. So for the difficulty, I'm going to give it a hard. The length, I'm going to give it 14 hours, because it isn't really a long Zelda game, really. Unlike Breath of the Wild, which did take me a while to complete. The Minish Cap didn't really take me long to get through it all. Took me double the time of Metroid Fusion, but the Minish Cap does manage to pull off with its length. And the audience, I'm going to give it a 7+. Because, yet again, there isn't no violence in here that, like, no blood or gore or anything like that. Although, the later Zelda games, like the 3D ones, may get a bit dark. I feel like the Minish Cap did manage to pull off a bit light with its violence. And I feel like they managed to pull off the Minish Cap quite well. And for the perk system, I didn't get an opportunity to write the perk system for my retro reviews like I promised, but when I do come to review Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, I will get to it. But now, I'm going to give the game the collector perk. It just about missed the certified gold perk, but I do think the Minish Cap was pulled off quite well as a game. And overall, I am going to give The Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap a 9.4 out of 10. I know most people would put the Minish Cap in the back half of their Zelda ranking, but when I got the chance to play the Minish Cap myself, I had a blast. I feel like the story, like the ending of the story may be a bit weak, but with the good writing, the best world building I've seen in a Zelda game, and some show-stealing characters, I do think the Minish Cap was a good pull-off. And the Minish Cap is probably the best Game Boy Advance exclusive that I've played so far. I've not played Golden Sun yet, and I've not had my full opinion on Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, but my review for that will be coming at a later date. But I do think The Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap is an underrated Zelda game with the fans. Because I do think the Minish Cap, in my opinion, is better than Link's Awakening. Probably because it has a better villain. And I do like the fact that some of these Zelda games have managed to have villains that are not Ganon, which Vati was a good pull off of that. So was Girahim in Skyward Sword. But overall, I had a good time with the Minish Cap. Like, I literally could not put the game down when I played through it. It was that enjoyable of a Zelda game. So guys, what did you think of my review of The Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap? Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and turn your notification bell on so you don't miss another video like this one. I am still in process of playing Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, but I will get my review out once I beat the game. So, I will see you all in a future video. BB8 out.